Good evening, everybody. 86 people already. That's wonderful. It's great to have you here tonight. It is this is the time, Pacific time. We will begin our program at 6 o'clock. So that means about 10 minutes from now, right? We got snow last night. Snow's gone, but I had to dust off the blackboard, etc. And there's an earthquake we should probably talk about in just a second, but let me get things set up here. Well, I trust that everything's functional here. Video, audio. Sun is behind a cloud right now, but it should come back out for good or for bad. I think that'll work. Boy, we got all sorts of bodies here. People, beautiful people, bodies. So yes, I'm a little off put right now. I was all set to come out here and got a visitor I'll tell you about in a few minutes. So he brought some goodies by, and we'll use some of those goodies tonight as props. And tried to schedule these live streams, and I think I set it up properly, so hopefully that's a help to you if you saw that somehow, a scheduled live stream. In fact, I put the scheduled live streams for tomorrow night and Thursday night as well. But otherwise, yeah, let's take a couple minutes. If you're unaware, well, that's another reason I'm kind of off for just a second, because I checked my laptop real quick before I came out here, and a magnitude 6.5 earthquake happened about an hour ago in central Idaho. And I quick looked up the depth. It was a pretty shallow earthquake, about 6 miles depth, I think. And if you're familiar with central Idaho, it was not in a populated area. The epicenter was not in a populated area. You know where Stanley is, in the Stanley Basin? Beautiful, beautiful valley with the sawtooth right there. So the epicenter was, looks like it's about 30 miles to the north of Stanley, some wilderness area. So that's the good news, I guess, if we're all looking for good news these days. So I trust it was felt. If it was shallow and magnitude 6.5, I'm sure it was felt. Well, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing it was felt. Boise and Missoula probably. And I don't really know. It's not a typical earthquake area from my point of view. I was just thinking coming out here, what kind of fault would that be? I'm guessing it was a normal fault. Yeah, we got time. Let me get my wooden blocks. So we did this in our second live stream last week, and we were talking about earthquakes in general, and I was using these wooden blocks. It'd help if they were right side up. And so much of southern Idaho has active normal faults, which means we're stretching the crest, much like all of the state of Nevada is stretching. Much of western Utah is stretching. It's called the Basin and Range Province. We did talk about it last week a little bit. And so even though there's not an obvious, well, actually now that I think about it, I guess there is a normal fault along the eastern flank of the Sawtooths, making kind of like if you've been to Jackson Hole, there's Jackson Hole, the valley, and then to the west, there's this majestic mountain range called the Tetons. And there's such a sharp boundary between Jackson Hole and the Tetons that, let me do this for, yeah, this is right. So basically the Tetons have lifted while Jackson Hole has dropped. And you can fact check me tomorrow morning once things get published, but I'm guessing that there was a normal fault. There is a normal fault along the boundary between the Sawtooths and the Stanley Basin. Same idea, same geometries. And I'm guessing it was a magnitude 6.5 earthquake about an hour ago on a normal fault that perhaps lines up with the Stanley Basin Sawtooth Mountains range front. And if not, then perhaps a related normal fault that I didn't know about. And you know, sometimes these earthquakes happen on faults that we haven't mapped at all. So we need to get our head away from Idaho tonight and talk about the Olympic Peninsula. That's the topic tonight, but just thought I'd throw that in quick. That's my old stomping ground, Central Idaho. I hope everybody's okay. Could we do a quick check-in, please? I'm sure you have already, many of you, but for those that haven't, I'd like to see. It seems like we have an ever-expanding audience, and it's tremendous to see. Whitefish, Montana, hope you're doing okay up there. You must have felt it, huh? Maybe a little bit? Hello, Patrick. Wisconsin. Too fast, I'm sorry. Beaverton, Oregon. Clarkson, Washington. Texas. Ording, Puyallup, Southeast something. Smoky Mountains. Dollywood, hello. Houston, Merced. Oh, many of these are familiar. So we've got a go Georgia, wonderful. South Bend, Shake Down the Thunder. Richmond, California. Yes, you are on the Hayward Fault. I suppose we should do some more earthquake stuff at some point. Actually, I think we are. Let me, showed you this last night, but this is our lineup for the rest of the week. And if you're brand new to us, we do this pretty regularly, hopefully to give you something to put on your calendar, definitely something to put on my calendar. And New York City, hello. Hope you're doing okay. Of course, I hope we're all doing okay. Are we doing okay? So, 2 minutes, huh? Let's see, what am I going to start with? Something will come to me. I don't know if I really need the wind just died down. We've had strong winds all day. I think I can go without this. Welcome to Ellensburg, Washington. So pleased you could be with us tonight. We're talking about the Olympic Peninsula. That's our topic. And that's not here. Ellensburg is not on the Olympic Peninsula. But if you have been with us for all these live streams, we've been going all through the Pacific Northwest, cherry picking topics that are easy for me to talk about. I don't know if you've caught on to me yet. But these are all lectures I've given before. Most of them are on YouTube, full-hour lectures with visuals and animations and things like that. And this is easy for me to do, limited prep. I suppose I'll run out of these eventually, but seems like I got plenty more that I can do without having to do a whole lot of work ahead of time. And so these are really fun for me, and I hope that they're fun for you, and I hope they're a distraction for you. Tonight, we're not only talking about the Olympic Peninsula, but we are going to go back to some of the plate tectonic stories that we've been dabbling with over the last few live streams. And especially if you're a regular visitor with us, or if you've watched the replays, you've done your homework essentially, and you can make sense of what I'm about to do. Children, I'm glad that you're with us tonight. Children from the Olympic Peninsula, a special hello to you. I know that you're tuning in tonight up there on Vancouver Island. Glad that you've been joining us. I don't know much about the geology up there, but I'm sure glad that you're with us. Without further ado, I think we need to get into it. Okay? Whiteboard time. You're watching from all over the country and many from other countries, and so let's do a little very quick geology lesson and geography lesson, basic geology and basic geography, to get us oriented. The star is where I'm standing. That's my backyard in Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Spokane is in eastern Washington, almost across the border to Idaho. And Seattle, we all know of, and you know what one of the most famous buildings in Seattle is, especially since 1962, is the Space Needle, built for the World's Fair in 1962, the year of my birth. And I'm going to start actually with a quick story. And the story involves my family. We took family vacations every summer. Both of my parents were public school teachers, and my dad farmed during the summer, and I had to work a lot on the farm, which I did not enjoy at the time, but looking back, of course, I'm glad that I had that experience. But as soon as school was out in early June, we would load up in the station wagon and head west every summer. My two sisters, my parents, and I. And the last time we did that as a family was 1979. I was just going into my senior year of high school. I was so cool. I was so cool. Why do I have to be stuck on this family trip for 3 weeks? This sucks. Well, we were out here in the Pacific Northwest, 1979. The Seattle Supersonics had just won their first and only world championship. Of course, they are no longer. And I want to share a brief memory from that trip where, of course, we were tourists. We'd never been in Washington State before, June of 1979. And what do? You go up the Space Needle. And I have a very specific memory, even though I'm sure I was super moody and everything else, that it was a beautiful day in June. We could see in all directions out those wonderful windows in the Space Needle. And we started looking to the east, and I remember reading a couple plaques, or maybe my dad said, you know what mountain range that is? Looking to the east from the Space Needle. And I said, no, I don't know. And he said, well, those are the Cascades. And there's Mount Rainier, and oh, look, to the south, we can see Mount Rainier, and we could see it just perfect right above the Kingdom, which no longer exists. My dad no longer exists. This is a story with a bunch of stuff that no longer exists. All right. Here's the point of the story. We had done all of our mountain gawking looking at this mountain range to the east of Seattle called the Cascades, and tomorrow night we're going to go to the Cascades in red and go to Mount Baker, Glacier Peak, Mount Rainier, Mount Adams, Mount St. Helens, which had not erupted in June of 1979. That was going to happen the next spring. Garibaldi, Hood, etc., Three Sisters. But before we left the top of that Space Needle, I definitely remember asking, what's that mountain range? and I had turned to look west from downtown Seattle. And being from Wisconsin and knowing there was seafood and piers and things, we just assumed Seattle was on the coast, at least I did, on the Pacific Ocean coast. And yet we were looking west from Seattle and saw a mountain range, like a super big mountain range. It wasn't just some land, it was a big mountain range. That is the topic tonight. The Olympic Peninsula in blue is not just a kind of flat piece of land like a peninsula might be what you think of. Terrible grammar there, by the way. But there are major mountains. I just forgot to look up the elevation of Olympus, but I think it's 9,000 feet, something like that. It's a big mountain, and there's other glaciated mountain peaks up there high as well. So our main objective tonight is to look at this mountain range, look at the Olympic mountains, look specifically at Mount Olympus, the high point in the Olympic Peninsula, and ask why? What? How? What is the geologic story for this particular area? Okay, you kind of expected that. And if you're from Washington, we haven't covered any new ground for you yet, except Seattle Supersonics and my dad. Okay. Now, let's zoom in a little bit more specifically, looking west from Seattle. You don't need it, do you? We just looked at it. So here's Seattle, here's the Space Needle, and we're looking west. Here's the Pacific Ocean over here. Here's the Strait of Juan de Fuca, a body of water that connects the Pacific Ocean with this in here, which is Puget Sound, marine water. State capital, Olympia. Hood Canal, you might have heard of. Victoria on Vancouver Island. Ocean shores. Okay, you can read just as well as I. Let me wet my whistle. I'm going to get a couple of markers and we're going to put some geology on this Olympic Peninsula and ask ourselves a couple of things. Actually, let me go back for a second. I don't know if my dad said it at the time, but he may have asked it out loud from the top of the Space Needle. I wonder if that Mount Olympus is a volcano. Like we all know, famously, these are volcanoes in the Cascades. Maybe we didn't know that as tourists, that Mount St. Helens was a volcano because it hadn't done anything yet. But we now know very clearly that the Cascades are a series of volcanoes that have been erupting for millions of years. But is Mount Olympus a volcano? And the answer is actually no. Mount Olympus looks like a volcano. It's a tall mountain peak in the Pacific Northwest. It's got snow and ice on it. Without giving it much of a thought, I guess you would assume Mount Olympus has erupted in the past, just like these other mountains. But this is not a volcano. It never has been a volcano. It never will be a volcano. So what is the geology of the Olympic Peninsula, and what kind of rock is Mount Olympus made of if it's not a volcano? Actually, let's do that. Rock hammer, rock. Shale. Shale. Mount Olympus is made out of shale. So, actually people here in Eastern Washington call shale rock. Like I'm gonna go, quarry some shale rock. I'm gonna put in a new driveway. Well, the shale rock over here in Eastern Washington is actually lava. It's actually basalt that breaks into these plates. So I've learned just to keep my mouth shut, not correct everybody. But at Mount Olympus, it truly is shale, which is a sedimentary rock. Oftentimes, if you go to shale beds, sedimentary rock layer beds, around the American West, you find fossils, most famously the Burgess Shale in Yoho National Park, up by Banff and Jasper. There's no obvious huge fossils in the shale of Mount Olympus, but a quick lesson on shale. It's a bunch of mud. It's a bunch of thinly laminated or a bunch of tiny layers of mud that got compressed into a sedimentary rock called shale. And if you keep going with the temperature and pressure, you can basically cook shale and make slate, which looks about like this too, only it's a little bit more fired. Like this is pottery now. You just leave it in the kiln just a little bit more. You get to phyllite, and it's been in the kiln even a little bit more. Okay, so what's Mount Olympus made out of? Not lava, shale. And shale used to be mud originally. So now we're thinking together, aren't we? Like, okay, well, how are you going to make a whole mountain and a whole mountain range on the Olympic Peninsula of rock that used to be mud? Where did the mud accumulate? Why isn't it mud anymore? How old is this shale? How does that factor into some of the other stuff we've been doing? Those are fair questions. Good questions. All right. I'm still not ready to do what I said I was going to do. I've got all sorts of little synapses firing. I don't know biology. Sorry. So last time we were talking about exotic terrains. And if you missed it, I'll give you a crash course real quick, because I'll cut to the chase. Much of the Olympic Peninsula is composed of the youngest exotic terrain to be added to the Northwest. So, crash course. From a couple times ago and last time, there was a west coast of North America at Spokane for a long, long time, hundreds of millions of years, even during the supercontinent Pangaea. And then the coast came close to Ellensburg by about 100 million years ago. I didn't actually say that last time, but I'm saying it now. So there were a bunch of exotic terrains, pieces of land that showed up from God knows where and added on to Spokane. We gained a bunch of real estate in the deal, and so suddenly the beach basically went from Spokane to Wenatchee, let's say, or Omak, something like that. And then our last live session, which was what? Yeah, Baja, BC. Ooh, the sun's nice and warm now. Baja, BC is basically getting the coastline to Seattle, and I'm going to put a big old green arrow that looks like that. What does that indicate? Baja, BC? Right. There were a bunch of exotic terrains that arrived from Mexico. You got to look at that last live stream if you're confused now. And so coming from the south, all the way from Mexico, is a bunch of exotic material, including Mount Stewart, including the Spokane Biotine gneiss near Wenatchee, including some of the bedrock around Chelan, including a bunch of the bedrock in the North Cascades National Park, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My point is, let's put a date on this. By 55, no, we'll be consistent with last night. So by 60 million years ago, our coastline is now at I-5. So I've built Washington from 200 million years ago to 100 million years ago to 60 million years ago by basically glomming on a bunch of pieces of land and adding real estate for Washington. You with me? Okay. Now, what did I just say about the Olympic Peninsula with exotic terrains? We're going to bring in one more exotic terrain, the last exotic terrain. And we're going to bring it in shortly after 60 million years ago. In other words, a little bit younger than 60. And that's going to be the bedrock for some, not all, of the Olympic Peninsula. But I just wanted to tie into the grand scheme of things we've been working on in the last couple of days. If you're new to us and you have questions, we will eventually get to your questions. You'll be typing them in uppercase, and I'll let you know when the Q&A starts. Right now, I'm not reading the comments. I'm just trying my best to concentrate on what's going on. And basking in the sun that we haven't had much of this afternoon. Okay? Now, let's get back to the specifics of the Olympic Peninsula and finally do what I said I was going to do. What did I say I was going to do? I said I was going to put some geology on the Olympic Peninsula. Port Angeles, okay, I already did that. Okay, so what, quiz time for you. What kind of rock is at this X? Because this X is Mount Olympus. What kind of rock? Delay in the comments. I'm sure you've already typed it. That's right, Matt, good. Shale. Shale is in Mount Olympus. I'm going to do that in green for no apparent reason. I'm just going to put a bunch of green stuff making up this portion of the Olympic Peninsula, including the high point, Mount Olympus, and the green is shale, and I'm going to give you an age. That shale is less than 40 million years old. So in other words, there's a lot of shale, some of it slate, some of it phyllite. It's heavily fractured, it's heavily faulted, so it's not just kind of a layer cake Grand Canyon-like series of shale layers stacked one on top of another. It's a complicated, contorted area. It's very complicated on a geologic map. But if we think shale and slate and not lava, not volcano, not magma for this green area, that's what we want so far. And you should be confused, like I don't get this. Well, this is kind of what we do in geology. We have to first map what we have, make a very careful inventory of the rocks and the ages and the minerals and that sort of thing. And then, after we learn about plate tectonics in the 1970s, 1960s and 70s, then we can get into the what happened, what is the geologic story for why this all happened. So right now I'm just giving you some of the data, whoa! Almost knocked my glasses off, almost crashed into the cell phone. Are you okay? Are you in your PJs? All right. I have a surprise for you. You've heard my message. Mount Olympus is not a volcano, right? Here's the surprise. I'm choosing red. It's the last day of March. I'm not particularly in a Christmas mood, and I don't think you are either. But I'm choosing red. Why? Because the red is lava. That's the surprise. The red is basalt. And the basalt is 56 to 50 million years old. So it seemed like we were making pretty good progress. We asked why the Olympic Peninsula existed. We said much of it was not lava, and therefore Mount Olympus is not a volcano. We're all on the same page. That's great. And now I had to screw it up by actually telling you that the bedrock between Port Angeles and the top of Hurricane Ridge, do you know that drive? There's a wonderful drive from downtown Port Angeles up into Olympic National Park, and there's a visitor center on the top of Hurricane Ridge, and you drive through basalt the whole way. It's called the Crescent Formation. Who cares? Okay, but this basalt, 56 to 50 million years ago, is a key part of the story, not only for the Olympic Peninsula, but for much of the Coast Range going all the way down to Northern California. That's coming in just a bit. But you have the main message, I hope, that we have two main kinds of rocks, shale and basalt, and they're not the same age. The basalt is like doing its thing first. It's lava, like Hawaii. You want to see some basalt? Especially for kids. You want to see some ugly basalt, and then some better looking basalt, and then some super handsome basalt? All right, here's the ugly stuff. Yucky on the outside. I'm showing it to you because it's got some gas bubbles inside of it. This is lava rock. This is basalt. In fact, this is the crescent basalt. This is the 56 to 50 million year old stuff from Hurricane Ridge, just outside of the national park boundary. Okay? Now I promised some better looking basalt, and I think the sun is going to work perfect here. Ooh, so it looks crappy, it looks ugly there. But then I just broke it open a half an hour ago. Can you see all the sparklies? Those are fresh minerals that cooled in the lava as the lava became solid. I don't think this is the crescent, but it's just a good looking basalt with some minerals we call phenocrysts. So these are plagioclase feldspar minerals that are rectangular in shape. God, that looks nice. That looks good. Oh, here's another piece. Same rock. I had pieces flying all over. I almost hit Bijou once. Haven't seen him since. Okay, now I promised the most handsome. So you can go to places where basalt lava is actually erupting in the ocean. Hawaii. And here's a piece of basalt lava that's younger than I am. In fact, this basalt is 9 years old. It's like in 4th grade or something, 3rd grade. So I stood there and watched this lava on the big island of Hawaii turn from orange into black. And it was very hot. I couldn't pick it up with my hands. I'm talking to the kids primarily, obviously. So basalt that is beautiful and shiny. And it's not hot now. I can hold it now, but it was definitely hot that day that I was watching it come out of Kilauea volcano, outside of the national park. Okay, we got to go a different direction now. I hope you're still with us. 6:22. We're doing pretty well. What do I want to do here? Yeah, I think I want to go right to, yep, I do. So we're going to take we've got our basics. And for the rest of my little presentation, I want to give you our current understanding of where this lava came from. Hint, it didn't erupt here. It erupted somewhere else. And where this mud came from. Hint, the mud was somewhere else and then got added to North America. Remember, I said this Olympic Peninsula is the last of our exotic terrain. So it's maybe not a surprise if you were thinking ahead that this stuff on the Olympic Peninsula is from the ocean. If you didn't make that connection, I'm telling you now. The basalt and the shale was originally in the ocean, and now it's part of the Olympic Peninsula. Let's go to the board. How old's the basalt? The crescent basalt on the Olympic Peninsula. How old? 56 to 50 million years old. Based on a bunch of stuff that I don't have time to tell you. You're going to have to take my word for it, I'm afraid, in this case. We know where that basalt was when it formed. In the ocean, yes, but we know more than that. There was a huge island off the coast of the Pacific Northwest. I mean, this is California, Oregon, and Washington, so this is no longer just a Washington story. This is a Pacific Northwest story. And some of you know the name of this island. And you hear the sirens? This is a small town. We don't normally have sirens. Hope everybody's okay. So Silesia is the name of this huge island. And the entire island was made of basalt. There was a lot of basalt that built itself off of the ocean floor. You want to know how much basalt? You remember last week we were talking about the German chocolate cake? And the German chocolate cake was our incredible thick pile of basalt lava in eastern Washington. And there were places where that Columbia River basalt was 3 miles thick. You remember the German chocolate cake? The volume of basalt, if you want to think German chocolate cake, in Silesia is 14 times the amount of lava in the German chocolate cake. There's 14 German chocolate cakes put together to make this large igneous province called Silesia. And when it formed, between 56 and 50 million years ago, it was offshore. It was not yet added to the Pacific Northwest. So if you're really thoroughly wide awake with this now, you know that this coastline here in Washington and Oregon is I-5. Seattle's there. Portland's there. We don't have the Olympic Peninsula yet. So this is a map of this time. Let's just say 56 million years ago. Here the thing is out there. And now I'm going to go advanced for some of our folks who are really into this stuff. We not only think there was Silesia, mostly off the coast of Northern California and Southern Oregon, but we're pretty sure now, there's a little bit of disagreement, but we're pretty sure now that Silesia was actually plopped on a divergent plate boundary. In other words, it wasn't just this huge island by itself, it was straddling two different oceanic tectonic plates. The Kula plate, K-U-L-A, heading to the north, and the Farallon plate, at this time, heading more towards the south. Again, we're tapping into advanced stuff that we did a week ago with the first live stream that we did. So think of North America kind of drifting to the southwest over this whole scene. So think of, you can think of it this way if you want. Think of Silesia as being stationary. Think of the spreading center location being stationary with the Kula and the Farallon spreading away from it out under the water. And the only thing that's really dynamic and moving is North America itself. We've already added a bunch of terrains. We have the coast to the I-5 corridor, but now we're going to drag, let me exaggerate this. So here comes the leading edge of the continent, and it's going to encroach over this spreading ridge. So we're actually subducting or having a spreading ridge dive beneath North America. So there's all sorts of weirdness going on inland of where we're subducting a spreading ridge. These are called the Chalice magmas, where the 6.5 earthquake happened an hour and a half ago. This is where we have all sorts of strange magmas between 60 and 40 million years ago, including the Teanaway basalt, the granite that anchors Grand Coulee Dam, the Absaricas in Wyoming, the Chalice volcanics in Idaho, even as far east as the Dakotas and Devil's Tower. That's all stuff between 60 and 40 million years ago that is happening because the crust here, now I'm getting fancy, kids, I'm sorry. Because we're extending the crust. Why are we extending the crust? Because we're drifting over the top of one of these major mid-Atlantic ridge-like spreading centers. And it has an effect on North America. I'm getting off track, officially, I'm telling you, we're off track. But not only do we have this Silesia, which you've already figured out is going to get added, and we're going to make the basalt, aren't we? That's above Port Angeles. We're going to take this basalt and cram it on. That's going to be the basalt of Hurricane Ridge and Hood Canal. All right, we're ahead of ourselves. But inland, there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on as well, including all those feeder dikes, et cetera, metamorphic core complexes, all sorts of weirdness that I've got a full lecture prepared to give if we ever get back to normal and I can give it in front of a live audience. So that's a tempting taste for that. Back to the main story. You know what we're about to do. If we drag North America over the spreading ridge and start making contact with Silesia, and that's what we're going to do, we're going to smush, can I do it? I guess I'll just do it this way. We're going to smush Silesia onto the edge of North America. Who came first? Who got added to North America first? The basalt or the shale? We haven't talked about the shale yet. We haven't talked about the mud. So the answer is, we're going to bring this basalt in first. And there's a weird horseshoe pattern that we'll have to explain, and I'm going to use the props to do that, impromptu. But we're going to bring the shale in later. Hope you're still with me. So let's do it. I forget what color I had Siletzia. Oh, I guess it was this. So we're going to at 50 million years ago, that's a nice round number. At 50 million years ago, there we go. The last of the dozens and dozens of exotic terrains are added to the Pacific Northwest. And it's a big boy. It's a German chocolate cake with 14 times the volume of basalt than the Columbia River basalts further inland. And so we're going to add this Siletzia to running all the way from Vancouver Island down into southern Oregon. This is a little too much. Okay, so this is a Western Washington and Western Oregon thing. I feel like I need to draw a cross section. So I'm giving you a map view. The ocean floor is still coming in behind Siletzia, but I hope you're not confused, and I hope you can see what we're doing. This is a collision that's happening 50 million years ago with Siletzia being smushed on and making up essentially most of the bedrock west of the crest of the Cascades. I can't emphasize this enough. This is not a little bit of basalt that's popping up here and there. Especially if you look in the subsurface, and that's what I want to show you here. So here's my backyard. Here are the Cascades, talking about it tomorrow night, not talking about the Cascades tonight. Here's Seattle. Here's the Olympic Peninsula. Hope you can follow my gibberish here. What I want to show you I don't think this is going to work. This thing is our giant gumdrop out offshore, Siletzia. Siletzia comes in, and Siletzia actually gets tipped up. And all the mud that's younger than Siletzia, that's still out on the ocean floor, is going to come in with the ocean plate after the accretion of Siletzia, and that's where we're going to get our shale. I did that quick because I'm going to try this with the props. So the special guest I had that dropped by the house 5 minutes before we started is the owner of Vindman's Bakery. So now we have a standoff between two bakeries in town. Remember, the German chocolate cake came from one bakery. This episode brought to you by Vindman's Bakery. Vindman's Bakery in downtown Ellensburg. You gotta love it. That's my made-up slogan for them. So Jeff at Vindman said, hey, I got some leftover pastries from this morning. If anything motivates you for a prop for tonight's live stream, go for it. Well, I had 3 minutes to think about it before I came out here, but I'm going to try to show you. We're going to bring Siletzia in with pastries, and then we're going to somehow bring in the ocean mud after we accrete Siletzia and accumulate a bunch of the ocean mud to make the shale and slate of Mount Olympus. This will not work, but it's fun anyway. See, I'm really cheap. I go in at 5 o'clock and ask if we can do the cut rate Danishes that didn't sell during the day. So this is a beautiful chocolate Danish. It's one of my favorites. This is going to be Siletzia. Okay? Siletzia. Siletzia. Now I need some kind of a backstop because I want to bring Siletzia in. How am I going to do this? All right. This is the granite from Mount Stewart from last night. Oh, and it's heavy. This could be a total disaster. Are you ready? You on the edge of your chairs? All right. So this is the coastline where Seattle is, 56 million years ago. Here's Silesia building. This is too heavy. This is too small. All right, come on, big boy. It's not that heavy. Let's go. It's not going to be forever. What I want to show you, and I promise I will eat these later, is that we're going to bring Silesia in, and what's the date for when Silesia first adds to the edge of Washington and makes a bunch of new crust? Right, 50. 50 million years ago, we're going to bring Silesia in. But Silesia does not just gently kiss the shore. We're going to have stuff from the ocean floor come in from behind it. And we're going to cram Silesia, we're going to shorten it, we're going to crush it. And I'm not flipping you off, and we're basically making it vertical. Silesia was minding its own business. It was like a huge, big island of Hawaii, maybe even, actually probably considerably bigger than that. And here this thing comes in and then gets compressed like an accordion and then again shoved on its head. Let me show you on a geologic map what that looks like. I'm not done with Vindman's Bakery yet. Cindy Shaw Cooper, Cindy Shaw Cooper, can't remember. She lives in Tri-Cities, sorry Cindy. And she has made a beautiful illustration. And I want you to notice the orange stuff is the Cascades. Do you see the crescent basalt? That's the chocolate Danish that I just crushed. I want to have you see that thing is kind of vertical where it is at Hurricane Ridge and along the Hood Canal. And while we're here, look at all this squirrely stuff that has been added after Silesia arrived. That's all the mud that was on the ocean floor that also got added. And as the mud got scraped off of the downgoing plate and added to the edge of North America, the mud became shale, the shale became slate, the slate became phyllite, and it became a huge effing mess. Much of it actually below sea level, much of it below Olympic National Park itself. But Cindy has done such a beautiful job to help us see this all working together. So Jeff from Vindman's Bakery, the world is your oyster. No. Here's another map, a geologic map of Western Washington. You can see the brown now, good choice, is our basalt. And then here's all the mud that's now shale, including Mount Olympus, which is in the middle of this. That is kind of a pale, whatever ugly color that is. And you can see the black lines are major faults. So we're continuing to bring this original ocean mud in batches and cramming it in. So how am I going to use the Vindman's pastry to get the mud to come in after we crush the chocolate Danish? Do you have an idea? Let me show you the options that we have. All courtesy of Vindman's Bakery. Don't leave home without it. So he brought all sorts of stuff. And there is a brownie in here, but I don't think anything here is going to work for being deep ocean mud that's going to come in and make our slate of Mount Olympus. I don't think so. Maybe you have an idea. So I had one other idea, also from Vinman's. So I actually did go into Vinman's this morning, paid full price. It's my way of not being cheap and supporting in these hard times. And here's some wonderful, I forget, I think it's called bread. Polenta, poppy seed, I don't know. Oh, pumpkin seed, polenta pumpkin seed. All right, so I quick sliced a couple things for us here. And we need the mud to come in to finish building the Olympic Peninsula. Okay, Silesia. Behind it, deep ocean mud. Behind it, more deep ocean mud. Let's make the let's make the Olympic Peninsula. Does that look like Cindy's picture? Got the chocolate. Nailed it. So even on this map, which is very simplified, and you can see lots going on with the entire state of Washington. This is courtesy of the Washington Geological Survey. Can you find the Olympic Peninsula? Can you find our chocolate Danish? Can you find our pumpkin seed polenta bread coming in wave after wave? Still going on, by the way. The Wanda Fuca plate continues to bring in mud, continues to bring in sediment, and we are continuing to build the Olympic Peninsula. 6:43. That's the end of my program. Time for some Q&A, some live Q&A. Please use the uppercase caps lock so I can see your question. I'll try to answer as many as possible. Thank you for staying with us this long. Scrolling back until I see some questions. Is the Puget Sound closing up over time? I can see why you're asking that, Justin. Not really. Puget Sound is more a function of sea level and a little bit of isostatic rebound with the Puget ice sheet that's left, which we'll talk about next week, I think. But it's all about relative rates of things, and this compression story is so slow compared to some other things going on, like sea level change. I see a lot of uppercase. There aren't questions, though. Come on now. If North America is moving west, is Asia moving east? More or less. Yeah, we're closing the Pacific Ocean with each passing year. You've heard of the Ring of Fire. That's where remember, we're talking about subduction. We'll talk about a lot of subduction or diving of ocean plates tomorrow night with the Cascade volcanoes. That's happening all around the rim of the Pacific Ocean. What's the difference in shale, limestone, and sandstone? I can answer quickly for you. They're all three sedimentary rocks. Shale, all sedimentary rocks are made out of little particles, little pieces of things. That's what unifies all sedimentary rocks. So the little pieces or particles in a shale are tiny little individual grains of clay that are too small to see unless you're under a microscope. But if you have a bunch of sand grains at the beach, that's a sandstone. And if you have a bunch of little lime or coral broken pieces or marine shells, that's what a limestone is. A lot of questions coming now. Thank you. Astoria Formation, question mark. I don't know much about the Astoria Formation. I think it's more along the lines of our sediment that we're, in other words, the bread slices coming in as opposed to the, in fact, I know it's not. The Crescent Formation continues down into Oregon and it changes names to the Siletz Formation, but it's all Siletzia. I wanted to show, you'll just have to hear me verbally that between Mount Olympus and Snoqualmie Pass is nothing but Siletzia Crescent Formation, either at the surface or in the subsurface. It's a major structure, a major formation. You want that cross-section map. I don't know, they may be out of print. The question is how to get the beautiful Cindy cross-section. It's a poster, and I think she was working with Steve Rydell down the Tri-Cities, and I don't know what the background is. So one side looks like this, and it's gorgeous. The other side looks like this, slightly different version. It actually shows our German chocolate cake. So, copyright 1998, revised in 2001, Cynthia Shaw. I'll just kind of give you her stuff and see if you can find her. I think she's on Facebook. Best I can do for you. A few more. Plenty more. Oh, warmed up. That sun really helped. Slate is an unstable rock, question mark. I guess compared to if you had a real thick bedrock section of gneiss or schist or quartzite, those are stubborn and stable. But if you're if you're concerned about earthquakes or instability just generally, I wouldn't be that concerned. There are some faults running through the Olympic Peninsula, but we typically don't have earthquakes on those faults. In the whole story, where do the San Juans occur? Yeah, the San Juan Islands are these colorful things here. Do you see them? So San Juan Islands, Friday Harbor, Anacortes, take the ferry over, that sort of thing. That's from last time. The San Juan Islands are made out of exotic terrains. Many of them on the Baja BC trip. That dinosaur bone was found in the San Juan Islands, and the dinosaur bone came from Mexico. Again, you're listening to me, and I'm talking about the Baja BC story. Listen to the last live stream. Watch it if you're not sure. But yeah, the San Juans are more tied to the North Cascades exotic terrain story than they are the Olympic Peninsula, even though you probably think of the San Juans as being just part of the Olympic Peninsula scene. So Hood Canal is more of a tectonic event rather than a glacial one. Hood Canal is very unusual. I don't know that much about it. But I would think of Hood Canal as being more of a glacial story. There may be a trough there that has a bit of a structure to it. In other words, maybe there might be some folding or something to create this kind of strange thing. I really haven't thought that much about Hood Canal. But it does happen to be kind of on the boundary. So if you cross over to Bremerton, that's the first look at some of the crescent basalt, or in other words, the Siletzia basalt we were talking about tonight. There's a couple other roads, but I can't think of the numbers right now. What fault does the Siletzia terrain end and the Wrangellia terrain begin? There's not an obvious major fault. I think we're going to do a few live streams on different kinds of earthquakes in the Northwest. We kind of did that one last week, which is just broad, but that was just kind of an appetizer. I didn't know what I was doing either. So we'll probably, I know, later on this week, I'll show you the schedule in a bit. We're doing a great earthquakes lecture, but then we'll do a shallow earthquakes lecture probably at a different time. And there are some shallow crustal fault, the South Whidbey Island fault, there's a Hood Canal fault, there's a Saddle Mountain fault. Hood Canal fault, I think I just made that up. But there's a bunch of kind of east-west trending faults. So there's not a major surficial fault that separates Silesia from the rest of Washington. That's maybe a surprise the way I presented this, where this thing's coming in and there's this major boundary change. But there's not a big fault on the boundary of Silesia and the rest of Washington that we're concerned about. Is the Gold Beach Shelf left over of the Farallon Plate? I don't know about the Gold Beach Shelf. I'm sorry, I don't know. How is Silesia distinguished from an ophiolite? Well, you know, Silesia was out there in the ocean, and we know it was an island for sure. In other words, we know that that pile of basalt out in the ocean was thick enough to get its chin up above sea level, because so much of Silesia has pillow basalt. If you drive up Hurricane Ridge from Port Angeles up to the Visitor Center on top of Hurricane Ridge in Olympic National Park, and especially if you have a roadside geology book with you, you know that I think it's mile marker 13 or 11 or something. And we shot a PBS program there, and you can see these wonderful, what we call pillow basalts, which are these fingers. I'm going to put them right in here. So there's, if you're a lava, basalt lava, and you're going into water, you're just taking one flow and then you're splitting into these fingers, and the fingers are crackling out into the water, and there's steam, and there's obsidian, volcanic glass, and there's palagonite. There's all sorts of very unique things that tell us that there's water present. Well, majority of Silesia has all that pillow stuff, but the top, the former top of Silesia doesn't have any of the pillows, which tells us that we were above water. We were subaerial, in other words, meaning we were in the air instead of erupting into the water. Ophiolites are more of a story where we're on the deep ocean floor, and we have, I wouldn't tie ophiolites necessarily to this story. There are ophiolites with some of the exotic terrains because we're taking some deep ocean crust and cramming it on. But I wouldn't naturally, I'm going to get my laptop all full of chocolate here. I wouldn't take the ophiolites and some of those deep ocean structures and automatically kind of glom it onto Silesia. What happened to the spreading ridge? Good question. The spreading ridge, remember our former diagram? We had the spreading ridge between Silesia and North America. The simple answer is the spreading ridge went beneath North America. And a spreading ridge is really just a gap between two ocean plates. I don't want to give too, well, a part of this new lecture I've put together is that we can still see some pieces of the ocean plate that are hanging. They're dead and they broke off from the rest of the ocean plate, but they're still there. So we can still see some of the subducted ocean plate stuff, but the spreading ridge is really just a gap where hot mantle is coming to the surface. So the structure of that spreading ridge itself just kind of got beheaded, is the way that I would think of it. What about slow earthquakes? Not for tonight, James. That's a whole nother story. How are sea stacks formed? Yes, if you're truly on the coast of the Olympic Peninsula, you have major sea stacks, and I don't have the total story there, but the basic idea is there used to be more land, and that land has been battered by coastal erosion, and you're preferentially eroding and chewing up and sending away portions of the coastline that are softer, and then there's maybe some resistant parts of that shale and slate, for instance, that hung on, and they remain as sea stacks. I don't know of much more than that. I'm from Wisconsin. What do I know about the ocean? Did the basalt tip up due to riding on the under-thrusting plate and hitting into the upper plate? Maybe. I think of Silesia getting tipped up just because we're bringing in so much sediment behind it. And there's also some folding, kind of some tacoing of that crescent formation due to some compression from north and south. Are the rocks islands off Oregon part of Silesia or a younger formation? I plead ignorance in Oregon. I'm sorry. I think it's younger stuff than Silesia. In fact, I'm pretty confident of that. There's Seal Rock, for instance, is a part of the German chocolate cake. Seal Rock is some of the flood basalts from the cracks that formed here, and those lavas 16 million years ago are flowing to the ocean. So there's even some lavas coming from Idaho that are making up some of those headlands along the Oregon coast. Marley Miller has a second edition of the Roadside Geology book of both Oregon and Washington, 2 separate books. Highest recommendation. Get those, they're wonderful. Is Kitsap Peninsula part of the Silesia or the Baja BC story? Silesia. Yeah, Bremerton, right there when you do that, you're on, what are you on, 16? And you're leaving Olympia, or you're leaving Tacoma on 16, right? And you're exit past the Target, Port Orchard, then you do that crazy right-hand turn. You pick up Crescent right there. That's the 56 to 50 million year old chocolate Danish. Baja BC story, remember, is too old for our Silesia thing. And I take your point. Like, where do I go in Western Washington and what story am I part of? If you're on the San Juans, that's Baja BC. If you're on the Olympic Peninsula proper with crescent basalt, you're too young for Baja BC. Is Silesia made from the Yellowstone hotspot when it was out in the ocean? That's what I was going to do. I forgot. We're going to finish with this. We still have 450 people. My original map was going all the way down to Northern California for a reason. Thank you for the reminder. That sun can't make up its mind. I'm not going to go nuts here. I promise this is 5 minutes. Okay? Why did Silesia form? We never got to that. There's a spreading ridge out there, fine, but why would there be this huge island built at the spreading ridge? Wouldn't it just be the rest of a spreading ridge scene? It's kind of like asking, why is Iceland so much bigger than the rest of the Mid-Atlantic ridge? Why can you live on Iceland but not the rest of the Mid-Atlantic ridge? The answer is, most agree, the Yellowstone hotspot built Silesia. How can we do it quickly? Yellowstone's here. Most of us know North America is drifting over a stationary hotspot. So if you go back in time, most of us know that we can find places where the Yellowstone hotspot used to be at different locations across southern Idaho between 0 and 17 million years ago. And then we lose it. We lose that trail of calderas. We lose the signature of the Yellowstone hotspot. And for 25 years I've been teaching, I don't know, I guess the Yellowstone hotspot must have like fired up 17 million years ago. Must have just formed right here. Question mark, I don't know why. And then in the last 20 years, 2 things have happened from geology work by Ray Wells, Paul Hammond, and a few others that are emerging. This story is emerging, and I'm excited about it, but not everybody's with the program yet. There's a caldera in Central Oregon called the Crooked River Caldera. And if you look at the lavas, the rhyolites in the Crooked River area, Smith Rock, there's some isotopic signatures that suggest Yellowstone hotspot. Not everybody believes it, but there's new papers saying that. There's a few other calderas as well in Oregon that I know very little about. But they generally get older. These calderas are older than 17 and they're younger than 56. And here's our Siletzia 56 million years ago. Now, why isn't this one of these circles? These are all supervolcano calderas made by the Yellowstone hotspot. If the Yellowstone hotspot's out here, and I'm saying that it is, we're going to melt ocean plate instead of continent. And so we're not going to get a big supervolcano caldera. We're going to get a huge mound of basalt. So if you have a hotspot beneath ocean, you make a large igneous province. If you have that same hotspot slipping beneath a thick continent, the chemistry is different, the physics are different, and you make a supervolcano and you make a caldera. The last thing to say then is, this was such a nice line because North America is drifting to the southwest. Looks like we can connect the dots here. Can't we just do that? And the answer is yes. These calderas in Oregon that are younger than 56 and older than 17, Oregon geologists are peddling the idea now, and I'm excited by it, that those calderas originally were lined up. And it was a simple 56 million year string of pearls between Siletzia and Yellowstone. And you're like, why aren't they on the line anymore? And you know the answer. Many of you do. There's been a clockwise rotation of the Pacific Northwest crust steadily and ongoing today that has rotated these calderas into Oregon when they used to be in Northern California and Northern Nevada. And then you're like, well, why did the Yellowstone hotspot start 56 million years ago? And nobody knows. We're finishing there. We're after 7 o'clock at 7:03. There's a couple more. Nope. Let me show you the schedule for the rest of the week. We were just talking about something called the Olympic Peninsula. I hope that you enjoyed it. Tomorrow night, we're actually going to a much more simple story, whereas we have a well-behaved ocean plate subducting beneath North America and making a line of volcanoes. Thursday, we're staying in the Cascades, but talking about things called ghost volcanoes. And then a special note that this weekend, I'm trying something new and giving the talks at 10 in the morning instead of our normal 6 p.m. so that we can have folks from Europe and Africa and even Asia join us. And hopefully that will be a thing, add a new flavor to our presentations. A toast for you. Siletzia, we salute you. And on behalf of Siletzia, I'd like to salute you. I'd like to salute your health. Hope that you're feeling well. Hope that your parents and grandparents and children and grandchildren are feeling well, that your neighbors are feeling well. Hope that we're all feeling well. And tomorrow will be April, and we'll still be at this. Here's to you. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll see you here tomorrow night, 6 o'clock. To Siletzia. Good night. I love you.